What's up everybody, it's Old Man Winter 8 for Sun and Ski Sports, and in this video we're going to show you the difference between the Burton ReFlex and EST bindings to help you find out which one is going to work best for you and your board. So when you're shopping for Burton bindings, especially online, you might notice that some of the Burton bindings have the word ReFlex in the name, and some of them have the letters EST in the name. And it can be a little bit confusing as to which one is going to work best for you. Now the quick short answer is the EST bindings will only fit on boards with the channel system. They mount on the outside and it requires the channel system to give you that adjustability. The ReFlex bindings will fit on any board. They will fit on 4x4, 4x2. They also make a 3D disc for the old Burton hole pattern, but they also will fit on the channel system. It uses the standard disc and adjusts exactly like any snowboard binding has for the past 20, 30 years. It really just depends as to what board you're going to be putting it and how many screws you're going to be using to mount it. And the next question you're going to ask is, if this fits any board in the market, including the channel, why do they make a version that only fits on the channel? And the answer is pretty simple. This rides and feels better. Now, with the EST system, you'll notice that there is no disc underneath your foot. This is just a big piece of foam. If I actually pop this thing loose, you can see it's very, very flexible. And the main core of the binding is actually just around the outside and this thin piece underneath the toe. So really the walls of your binding are only held together with the heel loop and with this thin piece up in the toe. Everything underneath is flexible. Now, why that's important is that when your board flexes along the length, this can flex with your board and it doesn't stiffen up the flex underneath your foot. In the past, by taking a binding and having it made out of a poly glass, a metal, anything that's a little bit more solid and dropping that disc in there, it can actually stiffen up the flex of your board 80 to 90% under your feet. That means that your board is flexing up to your foot, and then it gets stiffer, and then it flexes, and then it gets stiffer under your back foot, and then you get some flex in the tail. With the EST system, this only stiffens up your board 10% underneath your feet. Also, when you're riding, you can feel the board underneath your feet. You get a better feel for the board in general. And the nice thing about this, and the reason that you know that it does ride better, Burton doesn't charge any extra for it. If you look at the Cartel and the Cartel EST, they are exactly the same price. There's no upgrade to get a binding that rides better and feels better and will only fit on those channel boards. So that's how you know that this actually does feel better. If it didn't ride better and it didn't feel better, Burton wouldn't make it because they're not making any extra money on this thing. There would be no reason to make it if it wasn't a big difference between a plated binding and the EST system. Now, the really cool thing about the EST system, going back to the ReFlex, is with this idea of having the binding being able to flex underneath your foot, that's where the ReFlex plate came into play. They used to make more of a solid base plate underneath your foot with the disc. So with the ReFlex plate, what it is the walls of your binding, they do still come in obviously to accept that disc, but they're only attached at the back with a little thin piece of material here, and again with a thinner piece up underneath the toe of the binding. So this binding actually can flex a little bit more from side to side. The disc itself also has a thinner area in the middle where it can flex with the binding and with your board. Now with that, that gives you more flex underneath your feet, a more natural flex out of your board, no matter what board you put it on, whether it's a 4x4, 4x2, 3D, or even the channel. But it does actually stiffen up the board twice as much as the EST system. But compared to any bindings on the market, especially a lot of the older ones that are just straight to the board and flat across the bottom, it's giving you way more flex and it's definitely giving you a much better feel. So you can kind of get that EST feel with just about any Burton binding. So when it comes down to it, you can get a better flex underneath your feet no matter what board you're riding, whether you end up with the ReFlex or especially when you end up with the EST system. But again, that EST system, you do have to have the board with the single channel. And another good thing to note about that is if you have one of the old boards with the double channel system, it's not going to fit properly on that. The inserts are different. They actually have to come up out of the board. All of those old systems with the double channels, those inserts sit down in the board. So it's not going to be a very strong hold. And one more thing, no matter what you read on the internet, you cannot put these on boards with standard inserts. If you get these things on there and look and say, oh, I see that two of the inserts line up, the problem is The inserts, again, are below the board. The hardware is gonna have to be modified in a certain way to actually get everything to line up and to mount. But once you do get it mounted, not only is it going to void the warranty of your board and your bindings, it's just not safe and it's not worth doing. And that's why with a lot of the high-end Burton bindings, there is a ReFlex version of every single one. In fact, there's more ReFlex bindings in their lineup than there are EST versions. So again, just to reiterate, if you are getting a brand new Burton board and you're getting one of the higher end bindings that does come in an EST system, or if you're getting any of the other companies that do have boards with that single channel system, I tell people go for the EST binding. You're not paying any more for them and you are gonna get more performance. The only reason to not get this is that maybe you have other boards that are not channel and you wanna go ahead and swap your bindings over. But other than that, grab the EST bindings. If you have a board that is channel, but you have other boards you want to put this on, or if you have a 4x4, 4x2, or the old 3D, go for the ReFlex version. But if you got any questions about anything that we talked about in this video, definitely leave some comments down below. Also, make sure to like and subscribe to the Sun and Ski YouTube channel. And make sure to head on into any of their locations to check out the ReFlex and EST versions in person. But if you don't have a location nearby, just check them out at sunandski.com.